What if I told you that America's central bank, arguably the most powerful financial institution in the world, may have been systematically targeted by a foreign government, not just for intelligence, but for influence? This isn't about hypotheticals. It's based on Senate investigations, FBI assessments, and a growing trail of unusual activity. So let's unpack the case. Welcome to China Decoded. First, let's be clear on what the Federal Reserve is and why it matters. The Fed isn't just a bank, it's the engine room of U.S. monetary policy. Every time the Fed signals an interest rate shift, markets tremble, currencies adjust, and capital flows across continents. So gaining access to the Fed's internal forecasts, stress tests, or rate deliberations isn't just valuable, it's strategic. It offers a window into how the U.S. economy will move before the rest of the world knows. And that's precisely why, according to a 2022 Senate Homeland Security report, the Fed became a target. The investigation outlines what it calls a decade-long effort by the Chinese government to gain influence inside the Federal Reserve System, not through brute force, but through subtle, long-term recruitment and pressure. Let's go through the facts. Fact number 1. A Fed counterintelligence probe flagged 13 employees across 8 regional Fed banks. This group, internally referred to as the P network, showed patterns of behavior that raised red flags, patterns consistent with foreign recruitment efforts. Fact number 2. Several employees had undisclosed links to Chinese academic institutions associated with China's Thousand Talents program, a state-backed initiative that U.S. authorities say has been used to extract foreign research and intellectual capital. Fact number 3. Some employees allegedly sent sensitive Fed modeling code and internal data to Chinese institutions tied to the People's Bank of China. Fact number 4. One former senior Fed advisor, John Harold Rogers, was arrested in January 2025. He stands accused of providing sensitive economic forecasts to individuals with ties to Chinese intelligence while receiving payments of up to $450,000 from Chinese universities. But the case that perhaps most starkly illustrates the level of pressure involves what's referred to in the Senate report as Individual A. In 2019, this Fed employee traveled to Shanghai. According to his own account, later confirmed by internal Fed memos, he was detained 4 separate times by Chinese officials. During these encounters, his family was threatened. His Fed-issued devices were accessed. He was coerced into sharing contact lists, and he was allegedly pressured to tell a good story about China upon returning to the U.S. Despite this, he returned to his post with continued access to sensitive Fed data. Let's pause here. Why does this matter? Because if true, these incidents represent more than security lapses. They suggest an attempt to quietly shape or even manipulate U.S. monetary policy from the inside, and it doesn't stop at coercion. The Senate report also found attempts to influence Fed research through joint academic papers co-authored with Chinese institutions, undisclosed participation in foreign-funded programs, and in some cases, behavior that mimicked known espionage tradecraft, like using unmonitored email addresses and deleting digital trails. Now here's where it gets even more concerning. Some of these activities continued for years, even after warning signs emerged. In many cases, employees retained access to Fed systems, and prior to the Senate probe, there was no formal ban on Fed staff participating in foreign talent programs. So what did the Fed do? After the Senate began its inquiry, new policies were put in place. Fed employees are now banned from accepting payments from foreign entities in certain countries, including China. But here's the catch. Non-paid collaborations are still allowed. There's no universal requirement to disclose foreign contacts or memberships in overseas recruitment programs. In short, the door isn't fully closed. Now let's take a step back and look at the pattern. What connects all these individual cases? The unnamed employees, the indicted advisor, the academic collaborations? It's not just personal misconduct. It's a strategic playbook. Here's how it works. Step 1. approach Fed staff through research partnerships or conferences. These are often hosted by top Chinese universities like Tsinghua or Fudan, institutions with known affiliations to the state. Step 2. Offer prestige, funding, or honorary titles. Many U.S. economists, including Fed employees, have received paid positions or guest lectureships with no clear disclosure requirements. Step 3. Use those ties to cultivate long-term influence. In some cases, this means passing along non-public models. In others, it means helping shape how U.S. economists understand China on Beijing's terms. This approach doesn't require hacking or infiltration in the traditional sense. It thrives on gray zones, where collaboration meets compromise. And that's what makes it so difficult to detect and even harder to stop. Let's talk about the academic side for a moment, because that's where this gets especially subtle. At first glance, these may just look like co-authored papers on interest rates or trade policy, but some of the institutions involved, like Shanghai Jiaotong University, have appeared in U.S. intelligence reports for attempting to recruit American researchers. One Fed paper, titled Reserve Requirements and Optimal Chinese Stabilization Policy, includes authors from that very university. Another paper analyzing U.S. election outcomes after trade liberalization with China was co-authored by a Fed economist and a Chinese academic from the same network. So here's the question. When these institutions are repeatedly flagged in espionage warnings, why are they still shaping monetary debate inside the U.S. central bank? Again, we're not talking about conspiracy theories. We're talking about publicly available resumes, published academic collaborations, and patterns flagged by Senate investigators. Now, let's return to the leadership question. Fed Chair. Jerome Powell took the helm in 2018. By that point, according to the report, multiple internal warnings had already been issued. Attempts to exfiltrate data, unregistered foreign affiliations, and even staffers being directly coerced overseas had all been documented. And yet, most of those employees stayed. Most of the collaborations continued. And most importantly, no structural reform was introduced until Congress got involved. To be fair, Powell did eventually approve a policy barring employees from receiving foreign compensation from what the Fed calls countries of concern. But the rule still permits unpaid affiliations, which, according to counterintelligence experts, can be just as risky. So the question becomes, was this caution or was it complacency? To understand the stakes, let's zoom out. China's ambition to replace the US dollar with the yuan in global finance is well documented, controlling or even subtly influencing monetary decision-making in the US would be a geopolitical coup. As FBI Director Christopher Wray has warned, China is engaged in what he calls a whole-of-state effort to gain advantage across science, tech, and yes, even finance. And the Senate's conclusion is blunt. This isn't just about academic misjudgment. It's about economic warfare conducted in silence. So let's connect the dots. A senior Fed official indicted. Multiple employees flagged for ties to sensitive foreign programs. Internal data flowing to China-linked institutions. And in some cases, pressure applied through threats and coercion. All of this aimed at the institution that steers the most powerful economy on Earth. Now ask yourself this, are we looking at isolated incidents or a quiet breach of national financial sovereignty? And if the Fed, the very guardian of U.S. monetary stability, can be infiltrated, who's really watching the vault? Let's close with a clue that might have been easy to miss. When former Fed official John Harold Rogers was arrested, investigators found that many of his transfers occurred through printed documents, not emails, not shared drives, but physical handoffs during overseas meetings. Why does that matter? Because it suggests premeditation, a conscious effort to avoid digital trails, and it implies that at least some of this activity wasn't casual, it was calculated. So if that's what we know from just one arrest, how much more is still under the radar? We've seen what looks like a methodical attempt to gain access to the economic brain of the United States. So here's the final question I'll leave you with. If this kind of effort can target the Fed, one of the most secure, insular institutions in the country, what does that say about the rest of America's financial infrastructure? And more urgently, what haven't we found yet? If this analysis helped you understand the deeper game behind global finance, make sure to like and subscribe, because in a world of noise, this is your intelligence signal.
That's all for today on China Decoded. Thanks for watching. Behind the slogans, beyond the surface. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed. See you in the next one.